The More Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
The More Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world on TV, radio and online. I bid you all good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in all the world's time zones. This is The More Show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with Matthew Alper. Now, Matthew was born and raised in New York City. He was educated at Vasser and North London University, where he acquired a degree in philosophy of science. After teaching high school, Matthew went on to become a screenwriter, and then went on to write his seminal work, The God Part of the Brain, now in its 5th edition. Since then, Matthew has lectured at various universities on the topics of cognitive science and philosophy. Matthew Alper, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Now, Matthew, you would describe yourself as an atheist. Now, what is an atheist in your opinion?
Well, an atheist, in my opinion, is someone who, and of course there are varying definitions. Some people would say someone who doesn't believe in God, but I kind of take it to a probably more extreme level because oddly enough, I've known people who didn't believe in God and were against conventional religion, but then I found out later on that they had various spiritual beliefs. So they might be like, well, I don't believe in any organized religion, but I believe in energy and in whatever other words they use to define their own spiritual system. For me, atheism means a disbelief in all things spiritual. So basically, the notion of a God, a soul, an afterlife, anything that transcends what we know to be the physical realm. That would be my definition.
That'd be your definition, yeah. Because, I mean, so would you say that your belief is that there's nothing that that seems to be your religion then, in a sense?
Well, if a religion entails having certain rituals, a shrine, a spokesperson between me and my belief set, then I would say no, because I'm that spokesperson. I have no rituals involved. It just, for me, it's a baseline for how I gauge my behavior and come up with my value system. So I don't know if I would call it a religion.
No, yeah.
But, again, one might say, anything that represents a belief system, even if it's in disbelief, means a religion. To me, religion probably implies more things, but that is my belief system.
Okay. So, have you always been an atheist, in a sense?
Well, the book I've written since The God Part of the Brain, which is the book by which I, expand on this various philosophy of disbelief, and found that I, in interviews, was asked so often, why did I write a book like this? I actually wrote a prequel sort of about my childhood and adolescence, at what point was I asking questions? At what point did I come up with these various philosophies? And, you know, it's like all of us, it's been a work in progress. I was obviously not always an atheist. It's not like the first words I spoke were like, I don't believe in God. I didn't even know what God meant. So, you know, as I asked questions and got older, I found myself skeptical at an early age that, you know, stories like Santa Claus and it seemingly maybe even God weren't all that credible to me, or at least enough that it was worth questioning. And I was a curious kid, and I started studying science and philosophy. And as I got older, I started experimenting with meditation and then drugs, seeing if there was any means by which one can actually transcend. So I was a skeptic. I would say that I was an agnostic, meaning I just didn't know one way or the other, but with atheist leanings. Nevertheless, I still felt frustrated in that I didn't feel that I had any real sound support, or let's say a science to support my atheistic beliefs. So it wasn't until I came up with the underlying concepts from about, you know, the God part of the brain that I would say that I then felt that I had scientific proof to validate my disbelief, and only from then on would I say that I've considered myself a, you know, full-blown atheist.
Yeah.
A confident atheist.
And were your parents, were they religious in any sense or spiritual?
No.
No?
They are probably some of the most a-religious and a-spiritual people I've ever come across.
Okay.
They just could not care less. I was just a curious kid, and I had questions, and, you know, everything from teachers to parents of my friends were talking about this guy God and how powerful he was. So, of course, I wanted to know about him, and, you know, so it really just became my own quest. And then I came to terms with understanding the concept of death and wanted to know, like, okay, you know, do I exist for eternity, or do I have another, like, 60 years to go?
Yes.
And then just, you know, darkness forevermore.
Forever darkness,
you know,
yeah.
These were big questions for me.
Yeah.
I'm sure they are for everyone,
Oh,
but for me it was enough so that I put myself onto a personal quest to come up with some type of answer. And again, a lot of people do, but this was my quest, and it took me in probably a different direction than a lot of others.
Do you ever give it the possibility that you could be wrong?
Well, I would say I'm a 99.9999999% atheist. So there's the percentage by which I allow the possibility that I might be wrong.
Okay, because I mean,
ultimately
I like to think that I've got a fairly open mind in one sense, that, you know, there may be nothing, that this is all there may be. But what if? What if?
Well, okay. I don't know. I guess really what it is it's my confidence. I'm confident in science. I'm confident in the teachings of science. I'm confident that when I flip the light switch on my wall, that the light will go on. I don't have faith that the light will go on. I believe that the light bulb will go on. And if it doesn't, it means that I have to either change the light bulb or rewire the system, but the system works. And I feel that the explanation that science offers for human consciousness, that it's basically a consequence of our organ, the brain, I have such strong conviction that that's the case. There's so much evidence that when people, for instance, have damage to their brain, that consciousness is altered, so that I'm fairly confident that what we call a spirit or soul, this notion that, like, our core personality somehow transcends physical death. Again, I believe that consciousness, identity, what we would call a soul, is linked to the organ, the brain. I'm also confident that when our physical body dies, the brain dies with it. And I believe that when the brain dies, consciousness dies. So even if there were some alternate dimensionality, you know,
that we can't understand,
I don't. Even if there was something, let's say, beyond our understanding of the physical, what one might even define as spiritual.
Yeah.
I don't believe that what we understand as consciousness, that I, Matthew Alper, will one day know the underlying reality of that dimension, because once my brain stops, then I'm gone forevermore. Now, my energy, my matter will exist till the end of time.
What would be the results, though, of... okay, so let's just go on that on the opposite side to say that life does continue. Mm-hmm. Okay, and it's not understandable on this level that we're at now. We can't comprehend just what it is. But say it does. This wouldn't have been a wasted life for you in any sense, because you're still quite a moral person. You're living the life. You're happy. You're doing the things you want to do. But have you ever given any thought that perhaps life could have been a little bit different in some aspects of it had you had lived in a sense that, well, you can have the things you want. You can look at life from a different angle sometimes. Had you just given it that option?
So, if, for instance, I had faith in a spiritual realm, would my life be different? Let me just sum it up. So, for instance, if I did believe in Santa Claus, and I believe that every year he comes down your chimney, gives you a gift, etc., lives in the North Pole, elves, Mrs. Santa, all the above, like, would I be a different person? Probably not. Would it change the way I behave towards my friends and neighbors? And, probably not. So... I think I try to live in the same moral universe that I would whether I believe or don't believe in a God. I'm glad that I don't believe in a God, so that my, for instance, moral boundaries aren't based on the fact that a fear of punishment. Like, well, I'm not going to, steal this dollar from my neighbor because, I don't want to burn in hell. I'd rather have, and even if it turns out that that's the case, I'd rather have worked out things the way I have, so that my sense of morality is based in a certain compassion and, interconnectedness with all of men, as opposed to, so if someone says, why didn't you steal that dollar? I said, I would answer, because I wouldn't want him to steal it from me, and I believe in do unto others, as opposed to, I didn't want to burn in hell. So even again, if there is a hell, I'm glad that I came up with a secular humanistic value system. Regardless.
Absolutely, and I'll agree with you there. And I don't believe in anything like hell. I don't believe in a judgmental universe. I don't believe in any of that stuff. That's religion, in a sense. Mm-hmm. I'm come from a point maybe where, if we saw ourselves as all connected, that we all come from the same source, we would share. There'd be more. Love would be unconditional because we're all connected. The world could change overnight. And from the things you're saying to me, you sound quite a spiritual person.
Right. Well, again, the definition of what makes one spiritual seems to vary. For me, it represents a belief in some type of a transcendental reality. Like, so if I knew someone and I felt that they had a sound set, moral system, I would just say, wow, they're a very, morally refined person. I wouldn't use the word spiritual in that regard.
Sure.
But other people, might suggest that, what they define spiritual as really is just another person's definition for moral. And if that's the case, then spiritualists and secular humanists, share a lot of common ground.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. One thing for me is I've always, it's always fascinating when I get to talk about life after death and those types of subjects. But it's so important to live in the moment now and to be here now and to be living the life now, right? But when you think about it, what was there before the universe? I mean, science can't answer that. We can't answer that. We don't know. We have theories, but we don't understand it. What is nothingness? What's it look like? How does it feel? What is a conceptualization of nothingness? a universe that's ever expanding and just, unlimited in a sense. To get your head around what was there before, and we can't, then other things could, do become possible sometimes. That there could be more than we understand, that we think we know.
Well, there are certainly limits to what science can know. Literally, just physically, spatially, yes. What came before the Big Bang? Now, I believe in the cyclical Big Bang theory, that basically the universe as we know it, of energy and matter, basically goes through a series of contractions, of expansion and then contraction and then another Big Bang, and this has probably been going on from the beginning of time, whatever time really is. Again, we have a very limited conception of all of these things. So, even like our dictionary probably does not coincide with the actual universe's dictionary. So our understanding of time is not really what time is. So yeah, that opens doors of possibility to if we can't explain everything, then perhaps anything is possible. And that might be true. But again, given the guidelines of science, so if I were going to have a religion, I would probably say that it would be science, the doctrines of science.
Yeah, the religion of science. Yeah.
And again, because I believe that science is tried and true, and I therefore believe that the universe operates from a physical capacity, and that the whole concept of spiritual only exists in the minds of human beings. And again, this is the whole premise of the God part of the brain, that spirituality, this is the way humans are hardwired to perceive reality. I call it as a means to help us deal with our unique awareness of death. Yeah. That we've been hardwired to have this perception that there's this other realm, and that even though we know that the physical body will perish, we are comforted by this innate sense that there's something else. There's got to be something else, and it comforts us. So I believe it's just an evolutionary adaptation. But that's the reason that we all believe in something.
Do you think, though, that if we're a soul, and we've incarnated into a body to have a human experience, that to have that experience, we may need to forget about where we came from, i.e. amnesia of who we truly are. And in a sense, we're re-remembering who we are, or we have the possibility to do that. And what would be the point of a test if we knew the answers? So therefore, we are numbed out for truly who we possibly could be.
Well, when you say, okay, when you define an eternal self, something, what would continue in the afterlife after your body dies? Do you believe that will be you, essentially? Like, have your sense of humor, your memory?
My individualism, yes.
Okay. But would you also concede that, again, what you understand as being your identity, consciousness, is directly linked to your brain? When you see people who suffer traumatic brain injuries and suddenly, have no memory of things, or maybe they were a brilliant mathematician and suddenly they lost all their math ability, yes. or Alzheimer's, or dementia, or schizophrenia.
How would I define that? Well, what if that soul's chosen to have that particular set of circumstances for other people around it to learn from that experience? And what if even, and this is just a what if, part of that soul is not there as much as it was before? I mean, I don't know. I don't have the answers.
But does that person, are they then condemned to be, for instance, schizophrenic for all eternity?
No. I would say, what's the soul? Let's say
I get hit in the head tomorrow, and I suffer brain damage, and basically my memories are gone. My whole personality is restructured, and then I die. Yeah. Do I spirit come back as me now? I
think when you go back home, whatever you want to call it, the true you is back there then. The experience that you had down here, to choose that that experience that you had was just for that choice that you made for whatever reason you chose to have that experience. I'm sure that when you go back home, you are a soul that's completely back intact as who you were before you came down, and everything's made aware to you of why you came, why you chose that life.
Okay, and that's your belief. I respect that, but I'm just curious. So, like, if someone asked me, well, where did you come up with the information that gave support to your beliefs? I would basically, again, I would walk them through whatever I'm discussing, but whether it be a neurophysiology text, I'm just curious, where did you? Is this just something you just feel so right? It has to be true. Like, where do you even get the grounding? Where do you base this belief? Because that's a very big belief to have. Yeah. And I'm just wondering, like, do you feel that God came down in your bed one night and whispered in your ear, "This is how things go"?
I don't believe that God as most people do. Probably. I mean, I believe. No. This is just my own personal choice after 35 years of being on the planet and coming.
I understand, but I'm just curious. The choice based on what? I just want to hear, like, how did you vet out this information?
There's no vetting it out
in this basket.
No, there's no vetting it out. It's just what feels right. I would say it was just going along with feeling.
Okay, so ultimately you would say this is just how you feel.
Yeah.
But you do realize that feelings are, they're susceptible to error, right? Just like, well, why did you do that? I felt that way.
Well,
as opposed to,
I would say true feelings are the only true fact, but that's my own opinion.
Okay, so if let me ask. So let's say you were going in for open heart surgery, and there was a guy who was a credentialed doctor who had experience. He'd done 1,000 of these, and he was known to be one of the best in his field. And then next to him was his twin brother, who never went to medical school. And if you ask him, well, why should I let you do the operation? He's like, you know why? Because I feel like I can do it. Yeah. I mean.
But that's
again, I'm just as the skeptic in me. Yeah. I feel the need to question.
Oh no, please
what are
question.
People's,
intentions?
Where do they come up with their truths?
Yeah, I mean, it's like probably you've heard from a load of you've obviously mixed with a few different people in this field of those for and those against, and I mean, I never did like the ideology of a fear-based God, a God, a religious type, a God. I couldn't stand religion at one point in my life. I respect it now. I mean, if that's someone's personal choice, absolute respect for it. But I could never go down that road because, I'd like to. I feel that we live in a loving universe, not one of anything opposite. And fear-based stuff is not love.
Okay.
But I mean, and I respect your opinion as well, because I think this is why I've got you on the show. I find after reading up on your work, I found it fascinating, and I want to get into your book more just after this quick break. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
The Moore Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the Moore Show website.
The Moore Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms.
Welcome back to the show. I'm joined with author Matthew Alper, author of The God Part of the Brain. Matthew, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
Well, that was a bit heated just there before, but I appreciate your opinion, and I appreciate what you've put in the book and the time you've put into it as well, because it is interesting how the brain can contain religion, and that's what I want to get into now. But just before we do, actually, one quick question: what's the worst of the two, spirituality or religion, or mainstream religion?
I don't think I could give a definitive answer, like one's always worse than the other. I mean, I've known people who consider themselves spiritual, which means they like go to their yoga class and they have like a amethyst crystal by their bed, but they're crummy people. Like, I don't necessarily agree with their, you know, their moral stands. And I've known religious people who happen to have great faith in whatever their God is, who ended up being good people. Overall, as a force of nature, I believe that religion has a lot of potential to be very destructive and antagonistic towards other belief systems, which has obviously led to a lot of war historically. So I would say overall my answer would be that people who claim to be spiritual as opposed to religious generally are somewhat less dogmatic and probably a little bit more peaceable-minded overall. So again, it's not something I would say, well, you know, the spiritual people are always better than the religious people, because I don't think such alwayses exist. But overall, I would say that if someone asked me, okay, if we had to rewrite how humans are going to conduct themselves, would I prefer that humanity be very religious or very spiritual? I would say, well, let's go with spiritual.
Right. You know, I mean, God to me is just a word. It's dog spelt backwards. It's just a word. I mean, what if God is a more of a feeling experience rather than logical deduction?
I guess what if? I don't know. I don't believe him at all. So to speculate whether he's one thing or the other, I wouldn't even know again. But perhaps I feel maybe I should preface some of my beliefs by explaining the premise of my book, The God Part of the Brain. Maybe it'll help make
well, that's
my
what I wanted to get into
more
now.
Palatable for you and your audience, if you understand where I'm coming from.
Well, that's right. So let's get into your book, and let's get into the part about. Okay. So if humans are hardwired to believe in spirituality rather than a God, as you suggest, why are there atheists?
Okay, well, and I have a whole chapter in my book, Why Are There Atheists? But just for the sake of the audience, I don't want to presume they're going to know what my theory is, so let me just tell them the basic premise of the God part of the brain. The underlying premise of the book is, I start with there's a science called sociobiology, which basically suggests that any behavior that's universal has a genetic component. So, for instance, the fact that all cats meow, or beavers build dams, or honeybees build hexagonal-shaped honeycombs, it's not an accident. It's because these behaviors are inherited. They're passed down through the genes of the parents and then wired into the brain of that animal. So, for instance, if you took a kitten away from its mother at birth and raised it by humans, it'll still grow up to meow. It'll still grow up to clean itself in a particular way. These are inherited reflexes, inherited behaviors, which would then mean, since behaviors come from the brain, that somewhere in a cat's brain is a series of neural functions that we could call the meow part of its brain. If it damaged that part, it would lose its ability to meow. So I applied this principle to the fact that every human culture from the dawn of our species, no matter how isolated, has believed in some form of a spiritual reality, thus suggesting that humans are genetically predisposed, just like a cat is to meow, humans are genetically predisposed to come up with a belief system, to believe in some form of a transcendental or spiritual reality. And practically, it's an evolutionary adaptation, something that evolved in us to help us survive our unique awareness of death. So essentially, it's a coping mechanism that we have been hardwired, which is why some form of spiritual beliefs and a religion based on those beliefs forms around it in every culture to emerge on this planet, every human culture. Again, suggesting that we're born with it. There's parts of our brain that generate these convictions, these feelings. we'll meditate or pray and we're having what we call a mystical or spiritual experience, something's actually happening in the brain, which has since been recorded with the help of technologies like MRI, so we actually now know what's going on in the brain. So regardless of what God you pray to, when you have that spiritual experience, the same things are going on in your brain as someone who believes in something completely different, but that's their faith. So essentially, I'm offering a theory that suggests that there isn't reality. It's just that it's the consequence of the way that we've been hardwired to perceive reality. I call it nature's white lie. That basically, we've been wired to believe in this alternate reality that even it's not there, but the belief in it comforts us and makes us a more survivable organism, which is really nature's only concern. So that's the essence of the God part of the brain, and it's from that theory that I base all of my atheistic disbelief by saying I don't believe there's a spiritual realm. I just believe we've been wired to believe in one, and that's the preface of everything that I'm suggesting here tonight. Now, as far as atheists, again, a very good question. For every behavior that is inherited, any species, again, this applies to any organic form, we fall into a bell curve. So let's take a physical trait like height. If you took 1,000 people and measured their height, they'd fall into a bell curve. There'd be the bulge of the bell curve, what we would call average height, and on the tapering extremes, there'd be a small percentage of people who would be shorter or taller than the norm. The same applies to universal behaviors. So let's take musicality. Every culture has had music, essentially suggesting the same thing, that humans are genetically hardwired for musical intelligence. That's why, so basically, again, for this same inherited trait, we fall into a bell curve. So that if you take the world at large or any given cross-section, any given culture, let's say rounded up 1,000 people somewhere, and then measured their musical abilities, you'd find that the norm, the majority of those people would fall into the bulge of that bell curve and have what we would call average musical potential. But on the tapering extremes are going to be some who were born tone deaf or at least musically deficient, and on the other extreme, some people born as savants or musically inclined. So part of it is genetic. So what I'm suggesting is that if indeed religiosity and spirituality, which I break into two different instincts, because they play on two different parts of the brain and condition us to perceive reality differently, but among these two different instincts, we fall into the same bell curve. So, for instance, it would make sense that though the average human has average spiritual and religious tendencies, which is why religion has stuck around for all these years, on the tapering extremes, you're going to have a small cross-section of people who are hyper-religious, where religious and spiritual consciousness are going to play a greater role in their lives. And on the other side of that curve, you're going to have people who are religiously and spiritually indifferent. They're going to be apathetic. If there's a family of 10 and they take all 10 kids to church, maybe 3 of them will have the spirit in them, and another 5 will be, interested enough, and 1 or 2 will be twiddling their thumbs and waiting to go out and play with their friends because they don't get it, they don't care.
No.
So basically, I'm saying that's why there exists. That's the genetic explanation. Of course, environment plays a role, whether your parents, push religion or not.
Yep.
But essentially, I'm saying it's a combination of your genes and your environment.
Absolutely, and with your environment is key to what your outcome's going to be with whether you're going to be religious or not. I mean, a lot of these churches they are very sneaky. Sometimes they do set up these churches in these sort of poverty-stricken areas where it's easier to get people into religion. And
absolutely, well, usually poverty comes with illiteracy and lack of education, and there's no one easier to prey on than the ignorant if you want to inculcate them with beliefs in various gods and spirits and whatnot. So,
yeah. And, I mean, I do find as well that people with mental issues do tend to be very religious, as what you're saying. I mean, I've come across them, I've mixed with them. They seem to have that shift towards needing comfort from somebody else telling them what to think rather than them coming up with their own ideology. And I think that's a good definition, a bit of a definition of spirituality. It's your own understanding of what you think life's about, not being dictated to or told that this is the only way and that's it. But I think...
Right. Again, what I'm suggesting is it's not even... It's also partly about your genetic makeup.
God
that we're wired
to
have this sensibility that there's this alternate plane.
Yeah. Well, can I? Where did this hard wiring come from in the brain, do you think? I mean, and how long has it been there? We're talking...
Well, it's a facet of Homo sapien, of our species alone, as are many of our traits. For instance, humans are the only linguistic animal. We're the only animal that communicates through language, that puts together combinations of sounds that symbolically represent real objects. And that's because we have parts of our brain that evolved in us that give us our language abilities, the Wernicke's area, the Broca's area, the angular gyrus. If you damage one of those parts, you'll suffer some disability to your language abilities, what are called aphasias. So in the same way, it's the universality. It's the fact that, well, basically it comes with our species. The only other animal to have shown any indication of religious or spiritual belief has been Neanderthal, who buried its dead with artifacts suggesting a belief in sending that person's spirit to some other realm. But essentially, when did it evolve? It evolved with, the dawn of man. It's part of what's unique to our animal. Again, as is language, as is music, as are many aspects of our conscious behavior. As self conscious awareness is part of what's unique about man. So that's when it evolved. It evolved with the dawn of man. And how did it evolve? It evolved like any other, new trait evolves. That basically there's some environmental pressure where something is advantageous enough that those who possess that trait seem to survive better and longer, and then pass those genes on, and eventually whole new species are forged that way. So, that's just the process of evolution. What I suggest is, in this case, that with the dawn of self-conscious awareness, which is unique to our species, humans, first of all, I suggest that's the trait that made humans the most powerful species on Earth, because for the first time, an animal had possessed the power of self-modification. So, for instance, because I know I exist, if it gets cold, I can do something about it. I can say, I am cold, and I can sew myself a coat. Now, every other species would have to, if let's say the axis of the Earth shifted and we got hit with another ice age, every other species besides man would have to passively sit back and wait for the course of natural selection to take place so that maybe millions of years later they had thicker coats of fur. But with humans, because of self-conscious awareness, we've transcended natural selection. If we decide it's advantageous to fly, we don't have to sit back and wait to grow wings in 20 million years. We can build ourselves wings. We can basically reshape any environment we live in. So even though it was an advantageous trait, at the same time, while it made us aware of the fact that we exist, we became the first animal to be aware of the fact that one day we won't, that we die. And awareness of death was so overwhelming, the anxiety created by awareness, I'm suggesting, was so powerful that it could have wiped out our species. We became the first existential animal, the first animal that realized that it can't fight or flee the threat of death, that death is inevitable. So I believe that, again, that anxiety was so overwhelming that it possibly could have wiped out our species. Nature had to select a modification to the brain that basically compels us to have this perception that there's something else out there, that there's this spiritual realm, and that through this realm, we and our loved ones live in some form forever, which is a belief that exists in every single culture. Just every culture has their own unique, stamp on that belief. But nevertheless,
don't you just find consciousness amazing sometimes, though, that you can look out through your eyes and just say, I am aware. I'm aware of me, and I'm aware that I am. I mean, where does that awareness, where does consciousness come from to have this awareness and to be like we are? Don't you just find it incredible?
Well, it's a facet of the brain. I mean, for instance, we possess parts of our brain that other animals don't, that enable us certain capacities so that we can actually recognize our reflection in the mirror, that we have parts of our brain like the hippocampus that's responsible for storing autobiographic memory. So unlike other animals, like my cat, he doesn't know, not that he could answer if I asked him, but even if I could plug into his brain, he's not going to remember the time it snowed 3 years ago, or that first time he met the other cat in the neighbor's yard. We have autobiographic memory. So again, our brain functions in a way that gives us a sense of identity. And so it's all a facet of the brain, and it's absolutely fascinating. There's no question about it. I mean, we are a unique creature, even if there are other self-consciously and self-reflective creatures in the universe. Anyone who's part of that club is, we're like meta creatures.
It's incredible.
I don't believe we're spiritual. I don't believe we're godlike or we're divine or sacred, but I do believe that we possess capacities which are, and again, I would put quotes around the word, but miraculous. They're phenomenal. They're epiphenomenal. And we're very fortunate to have this awareness, even though it does come with a price. It can be very tragic because we do carry the burden of our anxiety and our existential awarenesses. But in a sense, we're gifted. We won the universe lottery. We could have been an asteroid hovering around, a moon, but instead we are humans who have this awareness, which is, to the best of our knowledge, unique to the universe.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we're just going to take a short break there, so stay tuned and we'll be right back.
The Moore Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the Moore Show website.
The Moore Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms.
Welcome back to the show. I'm joined with author Matthew Alper, author of the book The God Part of the Brain. Matthew, welcome back to the show.
Thanks again.
Matthew, I mean, we're just talking about consciousness there, and we both agree on that it is absolutely fascinating. And I've interviewed a lot of people on consciousness, especially when it comes to near-death experiences as well. Now, you cover this subject quite a bit, so just tell us about your research into the NDEs.
Well, what I found is, first of all, the fact that people from all cultures, Asia, Central Africa, there's nowhere on earth where people don't describe this particular type of phenomena, which, again, through my eyes as a scientist, as an anthropologist, would lead to, a possible clue that perhaps it's part of the way we're wired. So what they're now doing is, I have a chapter in my book called Near-Death Experiences, and it's basically discusses the neurophysiology of these experiences. Like they can now, put people in MRIs and study them in a lab setting and know exactly what's going on in the brain, what kind of neurotransmitters are being released, and what they're finding is that basically it's connected to the neurotransmitter called glutamate, and basically when the brain rather is not getting a sufficient supply of oxygen, one of the first things it does is it starts to secrete glutamate. Now, of course, if your brain's not getting the proper amount of oxygen, it could be a sign of either maybe your heart stopped, maybe you're bleeding to death. So basically, it's usually during a potentially fatal experience, and the brain secretes glutamate, and then glutamate sets off a chain of reactions that we process in a very specific way. So, for instance, when we have a near-death experience, or rather when the brain secretes glutamate, one of the things that does is it triggers the optic nerve. So the optic nerve flares, and subconsciously we sense a white light. Even though our eyes aren't open, basically all of the processing takes place in the brain. The brain can create any vision it wants, including just white light. So we see a white light. The brain's temporal lobe is stimulated from glutamate, and what they've found is that there's a guy, Dr. Ramachandran, and he studies temporal lobe epileptics. They're a type of people with a type of epilepsy that originates in the temporal lobe, and he found that, strangely enough, that about 25% of people who suffered from temporal lobe epilepsy happen to be very religious, and moreover describe their seizures as religious experiences, and found that basically the temporal lobe seems to be the seat of religiosity, and that there are temporal lobe epileptics that in the midst of their seizures sometimes lay on the ground like repeating the word God, God, God. They've done historical studies and found that a lot of the alleged prophets of different world religions, be it Muhammad, the Apostle Paul, Joan of Arc, were epileptics. Even Dostoevsky, who suffered epilepsy, wrote about his experiences, and he was a very religious man, and he wrote in his book The Idiot that the average person will never experience God the way he does, because it's only during his seizures that he really knows, that he really makes contact with the true God. So again, these are experiences that are taking place in the brain. So your temporal lobe's being stimulated, you're having your optic nerve flare, etc., and because of the way we're wired to perceive reality, and in fear kicks in this sort of religious instinct. We bond with our gods because we need to, because we're scared. And what ends up happening is people wake up having described that they feel that they went to the other side, they felt the gate, they either went to the gates of heaven, etc. Now, what's interesting to me is if you go to people of any different religion, they'll define their near-death experience in the context of their religion. So whereas, a Muslim might say, I saw Muhammad, a Christian might say, I saw Jesus, and a Jew might say, I saw Moses, and an ancient Greek would have been like, oh, you won't believe what just happened to me. I saw the white light, and I saw myself rising up towards Zeus, and he was holding a lightning bolt in his hand. Yeah. So obviously these are projections of the brain based in our cultural realities, but not reality itself, because unless all Zeus and Allah and Jesus and Moses, unless all of them were simultaneously real, then obviously these experiences are not relaying true information, but just information being conjured by our brain in the midst of a, in the midst of an experience by which our lives are at stake.
But what if we live in a universe where it's a universe that's holographic in a sense, right? So, we're creating this experience. So when we do pass on, creation still takes place. So if you want to see Jesus when you pass on, you create that experience. If you want to see Mickey Mouse when you pass on, you create that experience, right? So when they've had these near-death experiences, that was the level and what they thought they would see, because they created that.
But if they created it, then is it real?
Is any of this real?
Okay, do you believe that Mickey Mouse is real? That somewhere down in Florida that there's a talking mouse?
Well, I'm
who's
sure.
Dating Minnie.
Well, this is my point. You know, you create when you pass on. So, you know, depending what your level is at, you know, this is why some people in near-death experiences perhaps have hellish experiences, because that's the level they think they're at. That's what they think they're worth. So it's just another point of view. That's all I'm putting in there, just to say, well, what if? You know, I'm sure after I've interviewed people that have had near-death experiences. Eventually, they do go to this other place, this whatever you want to call it, home, and you know, the real sort of juicy stuff happens then. But you know, there tends to be things played out before with some people where they've created a funny experience just before, you know, before they've got to the real place you might call home.
Okay. I mean, yes, you know, certainly anything's possible. You know, I could be a speck of dust on the eyelash of Santa Claus right now. So, sure, anything's possible, but again, I place my conviction in things where at least I can find scientific validation, as opposed to what if. And I'm not meaning to be insulting or condescending, but again, you invited a skeptic onto your show and realized that, you know, the basis of our beliefs are based in questioning all things.
Oh, of course.
Trying to really come up with a paradigm that's based in more than what if.
But like we said before in the beginning of this conversation, one of the things we said was we don't know what was there before the universe. We don't really understand how we came into being, except for the sort of scientific understanding of it as we've got now. But beyond that, we don't know. So there is a lot of what ifs. You can't say there's not.
But just by not knowing, for instance, like what came before the Big Bang, to me, doesn't open the floodgates of utter imagination, so that, you know, just because we don't know a certain thing, that means that, you know, Willy Wonka and the Oompa Loompas were the ones who created that anything's possible, that it opens the gates so that basically just because we don't know one thing, that it means anything's possible. I still think that there's a logic to the universe, and even if we don't know what happened before the Big Bang, the fact that we can study what's happened since it, and there is a logic and there is an order to the way things work, and they seem to follow a certain set of rules, which are the laws of science, the laws of physics, etc.
Well, okay, but what if, right? There is such thing as extraterrestrials. Just what if? I'm not saying there is, but just what if, right? I mean, I tend to think that I would. Okay. Well, I would think that a universe as as big as what we understand it right now, I'm sure there is a possibility of sentient life out there. But
I would say that it's absolutely now that I would say is in the realm of the possible. Yeah. Do I believe that we've had contact? No, but I do believe that there probably, just by the laws of probability, there probably are other life forms in the universe.
Right. So
to me, that it would just mean that they evolved that we did, which is organic matter forged a strain that had the ability to replicate its information and pass on life.
Right. So say a civilization out there was, say, 1,000 years ahead of our technology, just say, and there was such thing as interdimensional travel. You know, that was how they were able to cross great distances, for example. Interdimensional travel. Well, that would maybe mean that there's multi-universes, for example. And if that is the case, who's to say that our consciousness doesn't continue to another dimension?
Only because what we do know is that our consciousness is tied to our brain, and we know that our brain won't exist forever.
Well, I'm talking about the soul part of it. Right. If we do have a soul.
Yeah, but again, if you would correlate soul to identity, then it means that your soul is ephemeral, that your soul is altered if you get Alzheimer's. Do you believe your soul is that sensitive that if you get a biological disease that your soul is transformed?
No.
But yet you do believe that your identity is transformed. So my question would be, then what's the difference?
They're two separate things. Then they might, the soul and the brain are obviously, I would say they're two separate things.
But if the soul is an identity, so if you would concede that your identity's gone, but your soul lives, then who cares? It's not your identity anymore. Your memories are gone. You're gone. So who cares what else remains?
Until you go back home.
Right, but I think that when you say you go back home, you believe that it's you, your identity going home. Again, your memories, your sense of humor, your thoughts, your passions, right?
Yeah.
But again, how do you reconcile that with the fact that if you're in a car accident tomorrow and your brain gets, injured or traumatized, you will have a different personality for the rest of your life. So your soul has been altered by having your organ, the brain, jarred. So
well, that's if the actual soul is fully in that body. I mean, who knows when you've received major head injury and you are not able to, you're in a sort of vegetative state, for example, maybe the soul isn't as attached to that body as it was before. So the real you is not there as it was before.
So what's the real you? Was it the you when you were 1 year old, 5 years old, the you that exists today? But the you that exists today will be different tomorrow. So who's the real you anyway?
Yeah.
Who do you imagine is going to live forever? Which of your yous?
The real you is the forever.
Well, were you the same person 25 years ago?
No, I mean I believe that.
Were you the same person when you were 5 years old? Do you think you'll be the same person when you're 85?
You are re-remembering, through this experience of life, you're re-remembering who you truly are, which is that spark of divinity, that for eternalness of life, the life itself. If you wanted to ask me who I was, I'd say I'm God, and I'd say you're God. We are all God. I would say we don't understand.
So it's shared megalomania?
I would say we all inherit the God essence, and I think that's part of the problem with religion in itself, is that God is separate. No, God is within.
Okay. Well, again, I'm no fan of religion, and I prefer people to be spiritual over religious, but again, for me, I don't believe in any of it.
No. But I still love you. Do you know that? I still really respect you. I do.
Well, good. I respect you too. I have no feelings to people who don't share my beliefs. I don't care what people believe or don't believe. That's their own business.
Yeah.
As long as they're decent people.
Yeah.
Most of the people in my life believe in something. I mean, if I ask them, I don't know, I would say most of my friends are probably atheists, but I've had friends who had various beliefs.
Yeah.
Sometimes they couldn't necessarily define them exactly, but they felt very strongly that they felt there was something out there.
Yeah.
And to me, it's fine, that's their choice. I don't care.
Well, that's an important. I mean, just moving on here a bit. The human evolution. I mean, where do you see us going in the sort of not too distant future?
Well, if you're talking about evolution, like biological evolution, I believe, as I was saying before, because of the fact that we have self-conscious awareness and we can modify ourselves, I believe that we are done physically evolving. We're not like the other animals anymore. We don't have to sit back passively and wait for nature to shape us. We shape ourselves. So we're not going to develop wings. We're not going to, people depict, they'll have drawings of man in the year 3000, and we have a big head and a big forehead to fit our bigger brains, etc. We're not going to get bigger brains. We're going to make computers. The computers are going to be our external hard drive, basically. They're going to be our bigger brains. We have them already. But our brains, as a result, are not going to grow. We're just going to make technologies. Our evolution is going to be extensions of ourselves.
Yeah, I don't know if that's quite scary or not, actually, but yeah, it is going in that direction, isn't it? I mean, it's just we've gone through incredible leaps and bounds in technology in the past 20 years, and yeah, and also with yourself as well. I mean, you must attend a lot of conferences in atheist-based conferences.
Sometimes. Honestly, sometimes I don't really enjoy the experience because I find a lot of atheists angry.
Really?
And I don't necessarily feel the need that much to go somewhere and throw mud at the Pope. You know, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, you know, just, again, I'd rather the Pope change some of his policies, but at the same time, I'm not going to let it interfere with my happiness. I don't need to focus on the mistakes of others. Again, I wish things were different, but you know, I'm not going to get on a soapbox. I don't need to, you know, again, sit and insult the powers that be. But a lot of the atheist groups, that's sort of the they take at this point, and to convey a certain science to support their lack of belief. But what you do with it, I don't care. You know, I'm not necessarily all about like defaming the church.
Right. Okay, that's fair enough. And what's your next thing that you're working on? What are you up to next? Any more books?
To be honest, works in progress are top secret. However, if someone were to explore the God part of the brain and want to know more, there are other books out there. So, for instance, the prequel is called Icarus of Brooklyn: A Spiritual Quest Gone Wrong. Which is about basically me as a child and adolescent and young adult on this quest and the various twists and turns that it took. If anyone is curious to know about my writings and what I'm working on, they can go to www.godpart.com, as in the God part of the brain, and they will be introduced to my other works as well. So, but what I'm presently working on, like I said, that's top secret.
Okay, no, we'll get you back on for that.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, Matthew, I just want to say a big thank you for joining us today, and I have really appreciated you coming on the show as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. And you may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk. And you can also like us on Facebook and Twitter for all the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.